It is so much more impactful and effective. I am a much better human and a parent when I am able to be relaxed and, again, be here. When I am not putting my air mask on, I tend to function a lot more in that fight, flight, freeze space because I feel like I'm out of control. I have nobody caring for me, and you're dysregulated, right? So I am a much better parent when I am taking care of me first.
What I would encourage people to do in the mental health or just in general, anybody who's listening to this, what I would encourage you to do is, rather than looking outward for the answers, to look inward, because the ability to heal, the wholeness, the wisdom, it's all inside of each and every one of us. And another part to this is we get caught up in these things that happen to us, and we might want to blame somebody else. We might want to say it's Trump's fault, or it's the Democrats' fault, or it's these people's fault. And ultimately, that makes us a victim. We might want to say it's our parents' fault, or it's our kids' fault, and so on and so forth. It's always somebody else. What my teacher says is, we're not responsible for the world that shaped our minds. So we're not responsible for the things that happen to us, but we are responsible for the minds that we use to shape the world.
We talk a lot about healing trauma, but we often miss how it rewires our most fundamental relationship with our own aliveness. I've seen students analyze Shakespeare, but freeze when asked, "How are you feeling?" Or adults who've done all the therapy, yet still perform life instead of living it. These aren't symptoms, these are survival strategies turned prisons.
These prisons are invisible, unfortunately, until they're not. I see it in my practice all the time. Veterans can't turn off the hypervigilance. CEO who's burning out, trying to outrun their own shame. Different stories, same wounds, believing I am what happened to me rather than I am what I choose to become.
As an educator, I've witnessed schools accidentally teach this too. A child called disruptive for trauma responses learns they're broken, not that their body is just trying to protect them. A grieving teen is told to focus on grades, might learn that their pain doesn't matter. The lesson, you're only valuable when you're convenient.
And I've seen therapy stigmatize normal human responses. Clinical bias turns cultural trauma into borderline symptoms. Dissociation can be medicated without asking why. People walk away thinking they're broken when really, the system has failed them.
That's why this conversation isn't about fixing people. It's about asking, who taught you to abandon yourself? When someone would rather numb out than feel their grief, that's not a failure of willpower, it's a survival reflex the world misunderstood.
Today, we're breaking down how to return to wholeness in a fractured world. We'll cover a few points. Why I still seek validation from my parents isn't childish, it's a survival pattern asking to be seen. How to spot the invisible curriculum of traumas like people-pleasing, rage, and rewrite it without the shame. Why healing isn't about fixing yourself, but reclaiming the parts of you that you exiled to survive. And lastly, the paradox of caregiving, how therapists and parents can stop sacrificing themselves to save others.
To guide us today, we are super honored to welcome Julian Bermudez. Julian is a therapist, guide, and a compassionate companion on the path of healing, specializing in trauma, identity, and the integration of psychedelic experiences.
He's also known for his unconventional approach, replacing clinical protocols with presence, somatic wisdom, and the radical belief that healing is a return to our natural wholeness.
Julian holds space for what many therapists overlook, the body's unspoken language and the patterns that silently sabotage us.
So his work helps people move from the survival mode to aliveness, whether they're navigating childhood trauma, existential questions, or the aftermath of a profound psychedelic journey. Julian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am on a mission to really destigmatize the human experience, #BeHuman. So hopefully you are aware, but if you wouldn't mind sharing one human moment, something that has happened to you. Honestly, it could be even something that has happened to you recently or a long time ago, but something that's just a superhuman moment that you would like to share with us to ground us in this experience.
Yeah, so I have a relationship, and she's also my business partner. We do this practice together, so we spend a lot of time together. And very recently, she was getting very stressed out over all the things that are going on in life, financial, economics, all the things that are affecting us. And the way that she would express that frustration was through creating conflicts with me. So it was an external expression of all the frustrations. And that activates threat response inside of me. And it was a really wonderful opportunity because things are very different now than they were a few years ago. So I saw right away, oh, she's very stressed. This is her way of expressing it. It's activating a threat response inside of me. And rather than me getting activated and going into that exact same pattern, I saw it and made a choice. And instead of playing into that, I decided to do something very nice for her and to help her comfort that stress that she was going through. And it was a wonderful opportunity for us to connect rather than having a conflict where we would end up disconnecting.
I love that. And Julia, I'm just going to add on to that because my husband and I actually had a very similar moment this past weekend. This past weekend was really chaotic, I think, for our country and very unsettling. And he is a police officer. You don't know that about him, but people who follow us might know that. And he was in a very similar space because he's kind of like on that front lines of some of this chaos. And we actually had a moment last night where I was like, I think you're stressed not about us, but the world. And he was like, oh, you're right. I actually do think that is what this is. And it's hard for us to really identify some of those emotions when we're living them and they feel so strong in us. So that's amazing that you all were able to get there. I am dressed up nicely because we are going to date night tonight to repair things as well. So it's always nice when you get to that, out of the fight, flight, freeze part of your brain and really into that frontal lobe. So awesome. Thank you so much. That was one of my favorite human moments that we've had so far because it's really like something tangible we all can relate to, but it's also, I think, the crux of the most challenging parts of being human is acknowledging where you are in those moments and what those emotions actually are. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and let's get started. Could you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your journey, how you approach your healing, how the healing process has evolved in your conventional therapy into more of the somatic work? Tell us what you're up to and what you're doing for work.
So basically, I help people go through exactly what we were just talking about. I help people try to identify and recognize these patterns that at one point in our lives might have helped us or maybe even saved us. They're what I would refer to as trauma adaptations. They're the way that we adapted to trauma, especially very early in our lives. And those patterns become the default, the way that we see things, the way that we engage with things, and our minds will rationalize and justify its existence. It's a defense mechanism. So what I do is I help people to recognize those and identify them. We look at the relationship that we have with those dynamics, which is to say a relationship with a part of ourselves. And most of the times the relationship is very harsh. It's we don't like this dynamic of ourselves. We struggle with it. We fight it. We judge it. We criticize it. We evaluate it. And then we try to exile it and push it away. So what I try to do is help people understand that relationship and to understand why it's here, why that pattern's here. What wisdom does it serve? What benefits did it serve at one point, and how is it harming us now? And the goal is to cultivate agency, choice, and responsibility, so that way we can choose different paths and ultimately liberate ourselves from those old patterns.
Oh my gosh, everything you just said resonates with me. And I think ultimately, like being in control of your thoughts and your behaviors is really liberating. I say liberation all the time in this work because it really is liberating to be able to be in control and in that frontal lobe. I'm going to give a really tangible example, if you don't mind, of exactly that whole process. I have two kiddos at home. One is 9, one is 13. My 9-year-old has ADHD, and she is the messiest human being I think I know on this planet. And her messes are so triggering for my ADHD because I have worked really hard in my 40 years to get rid of the noise, get rid of the messes, because they really drag me down and interrupt my thought processes. So she's on summer break. It's been very challenging. Over the weekend, I lost my mind. I had like a 20-minute time frame because we had a whole dog situation and my son went up to take a shower instead of handling the dog situation. So I lost my mind and was like, why is everything mine to do? And I became a screaming mom. And I hate when I become a screaming mom. It is, for those who have followed this podcast, you might know I checked myself into a mental health facility because I was a screaming mom and I really wanted to change that. I grew up in a screaming home. I still scream with my dad every time we're in a room together. But I was recognizing I was here. I was not here. And I said, kids, I am so sorry. I am screaming. I really can't control myself right now. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to get myself cognitively back online. Luckily, my children are very aware of how the brain works. And so they're like, oh, yeah, mom's here. She's not here. Let her go get there. And I was able to come back into that conversation and regroup. But what you do is help people kind of understand where they are in that process and in that journey and what are those triggers for that. And I think that's such powerful work and really incredible.
Sometimes adults unconsciously repeat childhood survival patterns. You were just talking about that. In your work, how do you help someone recognize, say, that people-pleasing, it's a decent example, isn't just personality, but a learned response?
Well, Erin just gave a fantastic description of how intergenerational patterns flow through us, how we take on the pain from our parents, and how that pain flows through us to the next generation. So when we're developing as children, we have very fundamental needs, two of them in particular that I'll focus on. The first need is for attachments, to be connected to regulated, mature, developed nervous systems. As humans, when we're born, we are the most undeveloped, immature, dependent species that I can at least identify in this world. It takes humans 3-4 years to learn how to run, to develop the neurological and motor skills to physically move their body in that sense, to where a horse learns how to run on their first day of life. So humans need to be cared for and attuned to for the longest amount of time with the highest degree of intensity that we can identify of all species on this planet. The second need that we have, in addition to attachment, is for authenticity, meaning that we're able to express our emotions, we're able to express our boundaries, we're able to be who we are uniquely, and that should not threaten the attachment. So we should be able to rest and relax, knowing that who we are will not threaten our fundamental needs. But what ends up happening is, when we're going through pain, when these intergenerational patterns are in place, and let's say our parents, for instance, are really well-meaning, for instance, they're attuned to us as best they can be, they're present, and they're trying the best that they can, but perhaps they're getting modern information from doctors or experts that are saying, when your child is crying, don't hold them. Let them learn to cry it out. Let them learn to self-soothe. So this child is expressing their emotions in the only way that they know how, trying to get a fundamental need met. And what's the message to that child? My needs don't matter. My emotions aren't important. In fact, my emotions are dangerous. If I express my emotions, it leads to a disconnection. So we learn to suppress our emotions. We can go even further with this example of, if our parents have emotional needs that need to be taken care of, and it becomes the child's responsibility to care for their parents.
Oh, I feel that one.
Yes. See, as children, we're very narcissistic in the sense that everything is about us. Our developing neurological capacity, our developing worldview is focused on us. It's all that we know of the world. So everything that's happening is happening because of us. So again, even in the best case scenarios where our parents are super loving, they're trying their best, they're doing everything that they can, but they're stressed out with the world. They're stressed out with the economy. They're stressed out with the finances. Their job is stressing them out. The political turmoil, all of the news and the media is coming through them. It's stressing them out. What's the message to the child? It's my fault. Mom is stressed. Dad is stressed because of me. So we adapt to that pain in the ways that we can. And one way that is very common that we adapt to it is we sacrifice ourselves. We sacrifice our expression, we sacrifice our needs, and we try to please and appease and take care of other people's emotional needs. So if mom and dad are stressed, it's my job to be agreeable. It's my job to please. It's my job to do all the things in order to make them happy. Because when they're happy, I get my needs met. I get the attachment. I get the connection. I get valued and respected. This is the origins of people pleasing. And this becomes, again, it's a pattern that helps us in the short term, but it becomes a source of great pain. It's a burden that children should never have to take on, but unfortunately, it is very common today.
And can I actually just continue with that? Because I feel like you're speaking to my childhood at this point. But I think about myself as one of my notes for even today is for me to not interrupt people. And it's one of these things, I've been a teacher, so I've been a presenter. So I'm always kind of in that world of like, I have things to say and let's present. But on the flip side, I think back to my childhood and I was the youngest child and I was really silenced. My sister's opinion still to this day is always valued more than mine in our family unit. And it's just as a woman in general, I feel like we're generally silenced in different ways and undertones. And I've had to, over the last couple of years, really recognize like my need to be loud or my need to always have my voice heard or my need to always interject my opinion is very much like a deep-seated, rooted, underlying nuance of me feeling unheard in various parts of my life. And it always pops up in these ways that are subconscious. They are ways that are nuanced. They are ways that, unless we like kind of take a step back and look at them from a balcony perspective, are hard to identify, but definitely impact how we move through our lives and function in the world. So yeah, I think absolutely that speaks probably to all of our women and girls listening really deeply, because I think that is like we are so trained in our lives to just be complacent and easygoing and go with the flow and be kind and all of these things. But I think equally men have very similar nuances and narratives that shape who they are and how you all show up without really having conscious awareness of it.
Do you mind if I unpack a little bit about what you just said there? Would that be okay? So you mentioned these needs to be loud, to yell, or to make yourself heard. Yes, there's the need right there is I need to be heard. I need to be understood. And so it's not about the need to be loud or the need to yell. It's the need to be heard. A fundamental need that's going unmet, that went unmet very early in life. And so when this need to be loud that you've mentioned and alluded to multiple times already is coming up, here we're seeing an example of the pain from the past showing up in the present.
So I think about two different demographics in this conversation. One is junior board members, and then the other is our boys and our guys, right? So we've had junior board members, there are 12 to 22-year-olds on our team, who have told me that having the internet and overexposure of all the internet has really impacted them in deep, deep ways. And it's hard for me to not think. I had one junior board member who once said to me, Erin, I feel like, if this is my first time riding a bike without training wheels, and I do it, the two things that we as children in this generation experience is I myself have already seen 100 people ride their bikes without training wheels. So I myself am not like celebrating this accomplishment because I'm like, whatever, I just did the thing. I'm checking the box. I did it because everybody else is doing it. And then same thing with the parents. They're like, I have seen a million kids do a gazillion cooler tricks on their bikes by this age. Like, great, finally you got rid of those training wheels. And there's no like celebration. And I think back to like those very fundamental needs that we have as kids. And is the internet basically circumventing or discrediting some of those really deep needs that we're seeing because of this overexposure to things? But then I was also going back to our males and our boys, not telling them for the entire history of humanity to not have emotions is also shorting that sort of process in their development, in my opinion, as well. So I feel like we have these two demographic of humans that are really probably understanding all of those questions and thoughts you were just saying, Julian, of like, do I matter? What do I need? Do I feel valid? I think that so much of, do you know what I'm saying? Do you agree? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we don't want to compare. And this is very important because what you were just mentioning about the training wheels and the tricks on the bike was a high level of comparison. The internet brings in a lot of comparison, evaluation, judgment, criticism. We're always comparing what we go through to other people. So we want to be very careful about that. We don't want to compare suffering. We don't want to compare trauma because it affects everybody differently. And I'm not saying that My trauma of being abandoned as a child is the same as somebody who's being bombed to smithereens today. But I'm willing to bet that we can find a lot of common ground in the suffering. The Buddha said, it is because you suffer and it is because I suffer that we can understand each other. So we want to be very careful not to compare the suffering. So the trauma is bad things happen that shouldn't. And that could be the abuse, the physical, sexual, emotional, mental abuse. It could be negligence. It could be the loss of a parent. It could be growing up in a war zone. It could be lots of things that happen that shouldn't in that sense. It could also be good things that are supposed to happen that don't happen. Exactly. So again, your parents are really loving, they're trying their best, but they're indoctrinated. Their doctors are saying, don't hold your kids. Or they're following common culture that says when your child throws a tantrum, when they express emotions like anger, they need to be exiled and sent to their room until they can suppress that emotion enough to regulate and come back into the group. So in other words, we're going to threaten them with the thing that is most important, the attachment. So the trauma is not about what happens to us. It's about how we respond to it internally. The most common and probably the biggest trauma that I see out there is a disconnection. We disconnect from ourselves. So when we're going through repeated pain, there's only so many things that we can do. We could set boundaries with it. We could tell our parents or whoever's doing it as children to stop. Don't treat me that way. But we all know it. Yeah. That's not exactly an option. Most times we don't know that that's a possibility. And if we were to set boundaries, a lot of the times it will exacerbate the situation and make it worse for us. So it will actually make our survival more in jeopardy. So boundaries are out the window. We could go away physically, but what 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old is going to survive?
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're dependent on the relationship. We literally cannot survive without it. If you take a newborn baby, you keep them warm, you feed them, you give them all the nutrients, but you don't hold them, they will die. Their development will stunt so much because their emotions are so big and they can't regulate them. They can only let them come out. They regulate it through the connection with the adult that it will overwhelm them and they will die. So we have to have that relationship. So the third option kicks in, which is we go away mentally. We disconnect from this. We get occupied up here. Our attention span to stay in the presence is almost eliminated. And we go through distraction after distraction to stay away from it. So what happens here is we start to develop adaptations. The disconnection itself is a response to trauma. It's an adaptation. It saves us. When we have all this big pain and we don't know what to do with it, that adaptation kicks in.
So for example, right before the election, I could feel my brain starting to go numb. Like 2 weeks before, I was like, I am just disassociating and clocking out here because my brain was protecting me.
So this protects us in those moments, but in the long run, it becomes a source of great pain and suffering. Another very common adaptation is that we develop beliefs about ourselves. So if we're growing up in an environment where we're not important, where our siblings' needs are always more valued than we are, where we're not getting the attention that we want or deserve, what's the message that we get as children? It's, I'm not important, I'm not valuable, I'm not good enough. This, in its sense, is a survival mechanism, because if our parents or our caregivers are causing us pain or harm, or they're not meeting our needs in the ways that we have, there's only two ways that we can look at it. The first way is we can say our parents aren't up to the job. Maybe there's too many siblings, there's not enough attention, there's not enough resources to go around, or maybe they're just not well prepared to be parents, or they have so many patterns of themselves that are causing me so much harm that this isn't going to work. In other words, I'm not safe. And there's not a lot of opportunities to thrive or to navigate that with that mindset of I'm not safe, my parents aren't up to the job. So the second way of looking at it is, well, my parents are older, I have other siblings, everything seems to be going well. The problem is I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of getting the care that I need. So if I could be good enough, if I could do all the things to get the attention, then I will get cared for. Then I will have my needs met. Then I will survive. And so this trying to be good enough, this constantly going out in the world and trying to assert myself or to do the things or to please the people. earn the approval, get the status, get the prestige, get the respect. It's all an adaptation of trying to be good enough. And we can see so many sectors of the economy in our society that prey on this belief of unworthiness. The beauty sector
That's
is
where I was thinking, yep.
a multi-trillion-dollar industry across the whole world that preys on the belief that you're not good enough unless you buy our product. Then you might have your relationships, then you'll be valued. So when we're having all this information bombarding us, and these social media platforms, they are designed by research through intention to manipulate our emotions, to prey on these beliefs and these pains that we have, to provoke us to do very specific things. So yes, the people who are plugged into the internet and are on social media and all that stuff, they're seeing the comparisons, they're seeing the evaluations, and that's triggering or activating the same thing that we carry inside of us already, which is we're already judging ourselves.
That's just part of the human experience. It's just what we do.
It's not supposed to be what we do, though.
Yes.
These are all adaptations to our current environment, and that's not how it's supposed to be. That is very far from the actual human experience. We're very sick in that sense. It's like an illness, a dis-ease, because we're not at ease.
And I think we've seen it so perpetuated over the last couple of decades with the internet, right? Like it really is just getting worse and worse.
When we go through this trauma, one way that we can adapt to it is we can make ourselves small, agreeable. Another way is we can make ourselves big. We can assert ourselves in. We can dominate the conversation. Aggressive, grandiose. We can go out there and get the thing before somebody can take it away from us. And, that's very seductive because our society tells us that's the pinnacle of success. If you can accumulate the resources, you can accumulate the wealth, you can accumulate the status, the respect, you can go out there and be important and valued by everybody. Well, then you get to rise to the highest levels of government and medical and corporate positions.
Yeah, there's this insight part, which we're talking about. You can have the insight that I do this, but it's getting it down to like, what do I do about it once I know what's happening?
There's different levels of knowing things, and the intellectual, conceptual, the words that are all up here. It's the skin deep level. We can, know the concepts of something, and our education system right now is based on this. Repeat all of the words.
Spell the word, do the math, whatever it is.
Exactly. But to be able to apply it, to be able to recognize and identify when it's active, and then to be able to engage and participate with it, especially when our pattern or our adaptation to it is to try to get away from it. So to recognize the default pattern and then to choose to do something new is very challenging. One way that we can do that is we start to build and cultivate a practice of consistently and constantly turning our attention into those patterns, into that pain that we carry around. So that pain from the past that keeps showing up in the present, we don't want it to just pop up, overwhelm us, and, take over the driver's seat, so to speak, without us even noticing it. We want to build a strong relationship and connection with it. So we are so attuned to it and so deeply connected to it that it's not a surprise. It's not unfamiliar. We know the situations where this part of us is going to get activated, and we can start to comfort it and soothe it before it gets activated.
For anybody listening, this is why it's really important. And you mentioned your partner, having somebody else in your mental health journey. I know we like to live in our silos in the mental health journey. We like to suffer in silence and by ourselves and whatever. But having other people who can recognize when you're triggered, recognize when you are cognitively offline, and really be able to be that guiding light. Because again, when you are here, your vision's blurry. You're kind of like seeing red, or you have tunnel vision in some ways. You're not gathering all the details of the world around you, and you're not in a space to actually make the decisions you want to be making sometimes. And so having that outside person who can recognize that is, in my opinion, is a really, really beneficial way to do this. As a teacher, I have found it and seen it be really effective in a classroom where I can say to a kid, hey, Daren, you're really dysregulated. Let's just kind of like breathe together and let's get you cognitively back online. Because again, it's liberating to be in control. And that's ideally what we all want to be. I don't think anybody is like, I like being dysregulated and angry and all the things all the time,
Yeah, you're mentioning another very important adaptation or belief about ourselves, which is I have to be strong and independent and do everything myself. So that middle child that you mentioned probably has that belief. The oldest child probably has that belief too, because the oldest child had to watch the second two come along and get all the attention and all the needs met. And they had to go be strong and independent and care for themselves and care for other people. So yeah, that's very important right there, is this belief that I have to do it. I have to do everything alone. I have to be
Myself.
strong and independent.
Yeah.
Exactly. On the other hand, when we're activated with our pain, there's defense mechanisms that are there. So we want to be very careful not to make it our partner's responsibility to be our parents or our children's responsibility. We want to make that responsibility ourselves, but identifying it alone is very challenging. So having a professional is the ideal, somebody who can really help us see the patterns and help us build the capacity to recognize, identify them, and work with them ourselves is very important.
I agree with that.
So if you have someone who's starting, maybe this is really hitting on something for them, but their inner critic goes buck wild and is like, you doing that kind of work, that's self-indulgent, that's too much. How do you help clients with that?
It sounds to me like another form of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve. I'm not deserving of taking care of myself. In other words, I have to sacrifice myself in order to please other people. So here we would find ourselves back in the same dynamic. And what I would ask that person is, where did you learn that? Where did this first develop in your life? Where did this idea that you can't indulge in taking care of yourself, that you have to do other things to make others happy or please them or take care of their emotional needs, where did this first come from? And if we can really identify and recognize where this pain first originated, I'll ask the same questions that I asked Erin earlier. When was this happening? What was happening? And what were the things that you really needed? It's really interesting. This belief of I can't take care of myself, I have to take care of others, is usually a form of trying to get my needs met. And it's trying to get my needs met through the lens of a child's view of, if I sacrifice myself, if I make myself small and I take care of my parents, if I don't say that my needs aren't being met, if I don't express my anger, if I make myself agreeable and small, then my parents will be less stressed. Then they will pay more attention to me. Then I will get the things that I need. So we really want to try and understand where this comes from. Why is it showing up here now? And what can we do to meet those unmet needs in more healthy, constructive ways? Ironically, that's going to be indulging and taking care of yourself.
You got to put the air mask on yourself before you put on the kids, right?
I use that analogy all the time.
And it's easier said than done, for sure. But I will say, as somebody who absolutely was never putting her air mask on when I was younger, to now somebody who is like, I understand exactly where I am mentally in all the spaces, it is so much more impactful and effective. I am a much better human and a parent when I am able to be relaxed and, again, be here. When I am not putting my air mask on, I tend to function a lot more in that fight, flight, freeze space because I feel like I'm out of control. I have nobody caring for me, yada, 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 yada. And you're dysregulated, right? So I am a much better parent when I am taking care of me first.
What do you say to the parents? Like, they are a caregiver and they might be in this sandwich generation where they're carrying up and carrying down. Obviously, resource of time is kind of limited between work, taking care of kids, potentially caring for aging adults. How do you navigate, again, the adults listening to this who are like, when am I going to do that?
It's really interesting because we say we don't have time, we don't have energy, but how much time and energy do we spend trying to disconnect from our emotions, trying to disconnect from our own internal experience? I spend way more time every day than I would like looking at silly videos on YouTube, consuming toxic media from the news about all the terrible things that are happening in the world. So when somebody comes to me and they say, I'm dealing with depression, for instance, the word depress means to bury something. So if you bury power lines, you have depressed them. The second part of the definition is to take away something's energy. So it's kind of like using all your energy to hold a beach ball underwater. Is you hold it, you use all your energy, and then it still bursts up to the surface. So my question is, what are you depressing? And very commonly, it's emotions. It's my expression. It's my own self-care. And I'm using a tremendous amount of energy to depress those things. So if we could use our energy to comfort our emotions, to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we are cared for and that we are at a place where we have something to give. That is the first and foremost piece of caring for children or caring for aging adults. There's boundaries that we need to set with our tasks and with what we take on. And we need to be able to ask for help when we need it, which is, again, we get into those beliefs that came from pain of I have to be strong, independent, and do everything myself. This is another form of sacrificing myself to take care of others. So you can't pour from an empty glass. And the more and more that you ignore yourself to put your attention on others is another form of disconnecting from that pain. So first and foremost, turning inward, taking care of that pain for yourself allows us to have a greater capacity to care for others, which is the goal here.
Like, what's a good message you would have for clinicians, therapists, of which I am one, as we're working with people? Like, what would you like to see changed, I guess, societally in the therapist world?
Every therapist that I've ever met, every doctor that I've ever met, anybody who got into the caregiving field, myself included, got into it for a very common, identifiable reason, which is, and this might be unpopular, especially if you're not quite ready to see this, as when my teacher was pointing this out in me, it activated all the defense mechanisms. That's not true. No, I want to help people.
I have this theory. Ultimately, all professions do something because it's for themselves. It's to fulfill their own buckets. Is that what you're going to say?
More or less, yeah. Yeah. So when we go into the caregiver realm, especially, it's usually because we want to be needed. We want to be important. We want to be we want to be valued. And that is in direct conflict with the idea of I want to help people. We want to help ourselves. We want to meet those needs. And so we become doctors because we're going to be needed from the moment we get started in the day to the moment we stop at the day. And all throughout our career, by God, we are going to be needed by everybody. From the time that people are born until the time that they die, they are going to need us. And that allows us to fulfill that desire of being needed and being valued. So exactly. So what I would really encourage everybody who's in this field is to look inward and try to see those dynamics ourselves. Now, when we go into therapy, for instance, almost every graduate course that I've ever taken when I was training in therapy, at some point or another, they said the most important job as a therapist is to ensure the client comes back. And they're saying this because you can't help somebody who's not coming to see you. But also there's another part to that, which is we're strapped with debt. The vast majority of us had to take out exponential student loans to get through this degree process. And the way that we pay for that is we have to see clients. We can't make money without seeing them. Now, I've known therapists when I was training that were seeing 7, 8, 9 people a day, 6, 7 days a week. By the time that they've seen the second, third person, they can't even remember who they talked to at the beginning. Same thing with doctors. If you're lucky, you get 15 minutes with them. And they have a tremendous amount of checklist items from the state or local government that is telling them what they have to ask, what they have to look into. They look at your chart for 20, 30 seconds before they come in, and they spend the rest of the time that they're with you charting, and you don't actually get to anything that you want to talk about. So we really need to evaluate how much time and energy we're putting into these external things and really start to focus inward on our own areas that need addressing, that need attention. And we need to look at those beliefs of unworthiness and how we're meeting the needs of being important to others. Because, for us being in the healthcare and caregiving field, for the most part, we don't know how to take care of ourselves and we don't know how to care for ourselves. So this is where we need to start. You can't help somebody develop something that we're not doing ourselves.
But it is so hard because as the caregivers, we want to develop thick skin for the people around us, right? Or the people we're caring for. I can't be like a therapist and you trigger me and I'm sitting there crying, right? So you kind of have to, I mean, as a teacher, I feel this way that you have to sort of try to build this balance. And I would agree that ultimately, if we don't have balance in our own lives and we don't help ourselves in these ways and we don't practice what we teach, we are going to be very unsuccessful in what we're doing.
And burned out and bitter and salty and all those.
And thinking about self-care in those professions, I feel like it's sometimes like not that you have to be creative, but you have to think about it differently. And it's a mindset shift, right? So like self-care might not be like going to the spa or something, but it might be like putting up boundaries and not being somebody else's therapist when I'm just trying to be friends with them. Or, not being in charge of somebody else's emotions when it's theirs to handle, those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's a very common belief is I'm responsible for other people's emotions. And, we find it everywhere we look is other people are responsible for taking care of me. And, if you're a therapist and you're getting triggered by what somebody's saying and you're having these emotions that are coming up, like you were just saying, what do you do with that? Well, you just mentioned you can't have that. So here's another justification to suppress our emotions. When I'm working with somebody and I go directly for the core of what's bringing them in. We don't spend weeks, months, years dancing around it and trying to gradually get into it. So we go straight for it. And when we're working with pain, we very frequently touch defenses to that pain. And we'll touch things like anger, for instance, which are there to set the boundaries, to push the threat away. So when I'm working with somebody and we're touching on that pain and that defense kicks in, the vast majority of the time, it's going to get directed right at me. And if my threat response and my hypervigilance of never being safe from childhood gets activated, then we get into that loop. And that's not a therapeutic exercise or situation for anybody. So I have to work on my own pain constantly before I work with people every single day. And it has to be at the front of my awareness. So I know when I'm with somebody that when this gets activated, I can see it right away. And it's very interesting because having my own pain, having my own emotions at the front of my awareness, you would think that it would take me away from being with the person that I'm with. But quite contrary, when I'm deeply in tune with my own experience and I'm able to comfort and soothe all of my own pains, and I've built enough of a relationship so I can do it quickly, I have enough of I've developed and cultivated a practice where I can soothe myself very quickly. That allows me to be with the person even more. Because if I'm just up in my head thinking about what I'm going to say next so I can be important, or they said something that upset me and now I'm activated and I'm in that, I can't be with you. So in order to care for others, in order to be with others, we have to first be with ourselves.
Okay, if that was not the most absolute reason for a parent to go to therapy, I don't know what is. But I think you talk about this loop, and I think it's really important to name that I have seen in my career so many parent-children dynamics where they're stuck in exactly that loop. And parents, if we are not actually soothing our inner child or healing those traumas from our childhoods, or even able to identify our own triggers, we are going to continue to have those loops. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, I have these dynamics with my kids. What do I do? And truly, I cannot express this anymore. Going to therapy, while sometimes can be controversial and taboo or political or whatever, is really how you get to the solution for those loops that you have with your kids. It is a common thing. I don't know any parent that doesn't go through those loops, but the only way out of it is truly getting to a place where you resolve your inner child, you resolve those traumas, you understand those triggers, and you're really able to almost present and work through it like you do as a therapist or a professional in that moment too.
Hey, Julian, thank you very, very much. This was really outstanding. I know our listeners will appreciate every bit of it. Before we wrap up, I know Erin always has one kind of final question for us. So, Erin?
Okay, so you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could rewrite one societal rule about mental health or trauma, what would it be?
If I could rewrite one rule about mental health and trauma, yeah, I don't like rules. How about this? What I would encourage people to do in the mental health or just in general, anybody who's listening to this, what I would encourage you to do is rather than looking outward for the answers, to look inward.
Yes.
Because the ability to heal, the wholeness, the wisdom, it's all inside of each and every one of us. And another part to this is we get caught up in these things that happen to us. And we might want to blame somebody else. We might want to say it's Trump's fault, or it's the Democrats' fault, or it's these people's fault. And ultimately, that makes us a victim. We might want to say it's our parents' fault, or it's our kids' fault, and so on and so forth. It's always somebody else. What my teacher says is, we're not responsible for the world that shaped our minds. So we're not responsible for the things that happen to us, but we are responsible for the minds that we use to shape the world. So what we want to do, what I would encourage everybody to do is, when things are activating, when things are troublesome or difficult or painful, is not to look out there for the answers, but rather, instead of trying to change other people and control other things that are happening out there, to turn your attention inward and to take care of yourself and to comfort and soothe and try and figure out what those needs are and try to meet them in healthy, constructive ways. Yourself.
Thank you again for joining us and for all of your incredible work that you are doing. It is clear that you are very knowledgeable, incredibly passionate, and it was really a pleasure to have you on the show. If listeners or viewers want to connect with you or learn more about your work, how can they reach you?
My website. That's the easiest way. We have contacts on there, and I post lots of articles and things like that you can follow as well. And if you want to, we have a newsletter on there as well, where we can stay up to date with daily updates. But also Instagram's a good spot as well. We post lots of things like these interviews or little pieces of information and things that are going on for us as well.
I'm sure it'll be posted, but what is the website? Can you tell us?
Yeah, psychedelic-integration.net.
To everyone who is listening or watching, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, leave us a five-star rating and a review. If you have expertise in the mental health world, education, social justice, or just generally would like to be on our show, feel free to email us at unplugged@undomindset.org with Undo Mindset in the subject line. We're always looking for voices like yours to amplify, so reach out. And don't forget, share this episode with someone who might find it helpful. Getting the word out is one of the best ways in which you can really support our mission, helping us to make mental health resources accessible. We appreciate you and your support. Thank you so much, and take care.